Good evening, everyone. This is Jaimini Astrology channel. I hope you are all well. So let's begin. So, as you can see in front of your screen, this chart is taken from the book called The Astrology of Mental Illness, an original research written obviously by Marc, Boney, and this particular chart is taken from the page 171. So, if you want to get more birth details about the person, the owner of the chart, who we're going to talk to today, please refer to that very book and go to the page 171, so you'll find more details there. So, before we start, let me just remind, this is Jaimini Astrology channel, so we primarily discuss charts from the Jaimini Astrology perspective. Okay, so the first point, I'll quickly describe what you can see in the picture, in the chart in front of you, just in case maybe there are some random people watching that video, maybe some people which are just at the beginning of the journey with the astrology. So let me describe what we can all see in the chart. So starting from the Lagna, or the first house, we've got obviously the first house falling in the sign of Karka, which is Cancer. And what can we see there? The first house is also Aruda of the ninth house. You've got it marked as A9. So the first house, the Lagna, is also the Aruda of the ninth house. Okay, Lagna falls obviously in the sign of Karka or Cancer. Going to the second house. In the second house, falling in the sign of Leo or Simcha, we can see that we've got Mars retrograde. There, Mars is obviously Gnati Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology. And the second house is also the Aruda of the fourth house, as you can clearly see. Going to the third house of Kanya or Virgo, we've got Aruda of the third house there. Moving to the fourth house, falling in the sign of Tula or Libra, we've got two Arudas there. We've got Aruda of the second house and also Aruda of the sixth house. Going further to the fifth house, in the sign of Rishika or Scorpio, we've got Ketu placed in the fifth house. Going to the sixth house, leaving the fifth, going to the sixth house falls in the sign of Sagittarius or Danu. And what we can see here, we've got Aruda of the 10th house falling in the Sagittarius, as well as Upapada Lagna, marked as you see as UP. Then we're going to the 7th house. Here we've got our Aruda Lagna falling in the sign of Capricorn of Makara in the 7th house. We also have got Aruda of the 11th house marked as A11 and Darakaraka Navamsha, which is marked as you see as DKN, and this is the 7th house of Capricorn or Makara. Going to the 8th house, as we can see, we've got Shani or Saturn in Kumbha or Aquarius, and Shani, as per Jaimini Astrology, plays the role of Putra Karaka. Aquarius or Kumbha is also the Aruda of the 8th house. As you can see, it is marked as A8 in red. Yeah? Going to the 9th house, what we can observe in the 9th house. We've got 3 grahas or 3 planets there, starting from Shukra or Venus. Obviously, Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces or Mina, falling in the 9th house, and plays the role of Matri Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology. Further, we've got also the Sun or Shurya, playing the role of Bratri Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology, also found in the 9th house of Mina or Pisces. And we've got also Mercury, which is retrograde, or Buddha, playing the role of Atma Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology. Technically, Mercury is in the sign of its debilitation, Shukra is in the sign of its exaltation. I'm not going to talk about Nicha Bhanga Raja Yogas. This is not the point of that video presentation. As you can also see previously, we're talking briefly about Shani, Saturn being found in the 8th house of Kumbha. Shani is obviously placed in its own house, yeah, but this is not the case. Okay, what else we can see in the 9th house of Mina or Pisces? We've got Darapada, marked as DP in red, falling in the 9th house. Darapada is obviously the Aruda of the 7th house. Okay, and apart from Darapada, we also got Karakamsha Lagna, falling in the 9th house of Pisces. Karakamsha Lagna marked as KL in red. Then we're going to the 10th house. 10th house falling in the sign of Mesha or Aries, and we've got here Chandra or the moon, playing the role of Amatya Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology. Then we're moving to the 11th house. In the 11th house of Rishabha or Taurus, as we can clearly see, we've got Guru or Jupiter, playing the role of Dara Karaka, as per Jaimini Astrology, and Jupiter or Guru is also conjoined by Rahu. Apart from that, the 11th house becomes also the Aruda of the 5th house, and it is marked in red as A5. Coming to the 12th house, we do not have any Arudas here. 12th house falling in the sign of Mithuna or Jaimini. Yep. Okay, so let me just quickly clear that marks. Okay, so it was a brief technical description on what we can see in that chart. Okay, then we'll move to the second point. Okay, so let me share a few words about the person who the chart belongs 2, and what is the reason why we're going to discuss that chart briefly. Okay, so the main theme is that the person was struggling throughout his life with the drug addiction to cocaine, to heroin, and other drugs, and that's the purpose. That's why we're talking about that chart right now. So I'm just going to repeat briefly. The person was struggling with the drug addiction, especially to cocaine, heroin, etc. Okay, so what I would like to add is that obviously Marc Boney wrote about that chart, discussed that chart in his book. As you can see, it is taken from the page 171. Okay, so there's no point for me to repeat what was already written by the author, so I'm not going to repeat myself. There's no need for that. All those who are interested, in getting more knowledge, just please buy the book and study. Okay, so apart from that, you might also check that chart as per rules of classical parashari astrology. When you analyze this chart according to the rules of traditional astrology, you will have a lot to study, when it comes to the addiction, to see the addiction in the horoscope, in the chart. So I'm not going to discuss that from the perspective of classical parashari astrology. We're just focusing on Jaimini. Okay, so then we'll come to the third point, where I want to stop for a while. What we do in Jaimini astrology, as you should know, we look at the chart from various angles, perspectives. You might say, what do I mean by that? Obviously, we look at the chart not only from Lagna, not only from Chandra, Lagna. We also use additional and different Lagnas, which are such as Aruda Lagna, Karakamsha Lagna, and Upapada Lagna. We also mark in the chart Darapada, we mark Arudas, we also mark Darakaraka Navamsha when we use Jaimini, but we're going to focus on that additional Lagnas, and at the end of this video, the purpose of me recording it is to enable you to draw your own, I would say, proper conclusions at the end of this video and see how it all works from the perspective of Jaimini astrology. So, as I mentioned, we focus on such Lagnas as Aruda Lagna, Karakamsha Lagna, Upapada Lagna. Here I'm going to skip Aruda Lagna. You can research that chart on your own through the Aruda Lagna. Okay, what I'm going to focus are another two Lagnas, which are Karakamsha Lagna and Upapada Lagna. Okay, so before we briefly analyze the chart from those Lagnas, let me mention a few things what we're going to focus on when it comes to addiction. Addiction to drugs, might be addiction to tobacco, might be alcohol addiction. What is of the first, I would say, of the main importance when it comes to talk about addiction, considering addiction. So we talk about the second house. We take into consideration the second house. Why the second house? You all should know that by now if you study astrology. Second house is obviously related to food. It shows our mouth. Yeah, it's related to what we eat, what we drink, what we put into our mouth. It shows what we ingest, what we eat, what we drink. So that's nothing new. We all know about that. So what we want to focus on. This is also not a big secret for those who study astrology. We're going to focus on the affliction of the second house by malefic grahas, by malefic planets such as Shani, such as Mangala or Mars, such as Rahu, Ketu, primarily. Okay? So, this is about the second house. Okay? What else we need to take into consideration? Also, the fifth house. Why the fifth house? Apart from showing our stomach, our liver, obviously, fifth house, as any other house, shows different things, many different things. It's responsible for many different things, but apart from showing our stomach, our liver, it is also responsible for our intelligence, for our thinking process, yeah, for our mind, yeah. So that's why when we talk about addiction or many different things from different perspectives, different spheres of life, we take fifth house into consideration. Here when we're talking about the addiction, we also need to focus on the fifth house and affliction to the fifth house by malefic, malicious planets or grahas, for instance. Yeah. Apart from that, obviously, we need to focus on the moon, on the Chandra. Chandra is the significator Karaka for our mind. Chandra shows our thinking process. Yeah? The one thing is obviously Chandra, moon, which shows the mind. Another one is Mercury. Mercury, Buddha, which is responsible for our intelligence and help us to manage our mind. This is the, I would say, the superiority of the intelligence over the mind, because the intelligence, as people, I can't remember who mentioned that, who was writing or talking about that, but that person was obviously quite right. Yeah, the superiority of the intelligence is that it helps us to, I would say, to keep in shape our mind, to keep managing our mind. Yeah, so that's why we're talking about the intelligence and its superiority. Yeah, because it helps us with managing our mind. Okay, so obviously we need to take into consideration Chandra, which is moon, because it shows our mind thinking processes, and we also need to take into consideration Mercury, because it is our intellect, our intelligence. Okay, what else before we focus on those two lagnas. Okay. Briefly, we need to acknowledge, we need to understand what are the main karakas or significators for the drugs, for taking drugs. What grahas are responsible for that? Which grahas show in the chart? Yeah? Taking different poisonous substances. Yeah? Showing the addiction. It might be, as I've said before, it might be tobacco addiction, it might be alcohol addiction, it might be even addiction to sweets, whatever you like. Okay, so the main karaka for the drugs, as we know, as you should know, obviously if you deal with astrology for long enough, is Rahu. Rahu is the main karaka of drugs. Yeah? So this is the first what we need to know, obviously. Then we need to take into consideration malefics. Malefics such as Mangala, which is Mars, and Shani. Obviously, also we need to take into consideration Ketu. With Ketu, it needs, I would say, more research. Obviously, we might see it from that perspective that Ketu, as the malefic, afflicts. Yeah, there are different views on Ketu. Some people say that Ketu, as per Jaimini rules, is not malefic. Okay, I'm not going to comment on that at the moment because this is not the purport, this is not the aim of this video. But okay, coming to malefics, yeah, to Mars. Marc Boney, I would say, very rightly, yeah, remarked in his book, he made that remark that Mars is the karaka for drugs which fall in the category of stimulants, yeah, stimulants, and Mars should be considered the karaka of cocaine. I fully agree. When it comes to Shani, Saturn, I believe primarily that Shani shows us affliction in general. Yeah, it doesn't have to be drugs. I would say drug related. Yeah, doesn't have to show drug addiction. When it is joined, when Shani is joined by, by other malefics such as Rahu, Mangala, yeah, it might show us that whole picture. It might show us drug addiction. In general, Shani shows the addiction, yeah, taking something which is not healthy, eating something which is not healthy, damaging to your health. It might faster Shani would show you alcohol addiction. I saw charts with Shani in the second house showing an alcohol addiction. Yeah. Generally, any graha, when you're analyzing the chart, any graha falling in the second house might, in theory, show you addiction, might show you overeating. Such as Jupiter in conjunction with Mercury and Venus. It might show you overeating, yeah, addiction to food, yeah, eating too much, for instance, but that's not the case. Okay, coming back to Shani might show you addiction to alcohol. I would say to tobacco, smoking, yeah. Might show you addiction to, I would say, to tea, yeah, for some people, addiction to tea or coffee. Okay, addiction when it comes to the alcohol addiction, I would say even Chandra together with Shani might show you alcohol addiction. Okay, so just to conclude that speech on Shani in general shows addiction, shows that or meat addiction, Shani might show also meat addiction, eating a lot of meat. So in general, Shani might show you that you take something which is unhealthy to your body. Okay? So, like I've said, alcohol, tea, meat, liquor, addiction, and addiction in general, that might be shown by Shani, and in conjunction with other grahas, the picture might be, especially with the malefics or with the moon, the picture might be modified. Okay, when it comes to Ketu, I would say it requires, I would say, more research. I would suggest, but this is only my idea, that Ketu, in, I would say, related also to other malefics, might show taking some hallucinogens, like mushrooms, like LSD. That's my original idea. Okay, but when it comes to addiction, so we talked about Shani, we talked about Rahu as the main karaka for drug addiction, we talked about Ketu. Also, we need to consider Mars, Mangala, as Marc Boney very rightly noticed and remarked that Mangala should be taken as karaka of stimulants such as cocaine, and I fully agree with that. Okay, so that was my, I would say, introduction to Caracas, brief speech about those malefic grahas which might signify addiction, different substances, might be Caracas for different substances. Also, we do not forget about moon, which also contributes, and might also show, I would say, alcohol addiction, or sleeping pills addiction, or addiction to any kind of drinks. Okay, so finishing that, let us finally focus on those two lagnas. Okay, so let's start from Karakamsha lagna. Okay, so what we can see as checking this chart from that angle, from Karakamsha lagna. Okay, so let's have a look what we've got in Karakamsha. Obviously, we've got Shukra exalted, we've got Matrikaraka, we've got Surya, which is the sun, Bhatrikaraka, and we've got also Mercury Buddha retrograde as Atma Karaka in its debilitation. Some people would say it is Nichabanga Raja Yoga. Okay, I'm not talking about that, okay, because this is not the most important here at the moment. So let's have a look at the second house. Okay, let's have a look at the second house from Karakamsha, which falls in the sign of Mesha, which is Aries. Okay, so in the second house we've got the moon, Chandra, Amatya Karaka in Aries. Okay, so that's the second house, representing all what we eat, all what we drink, our intake, our input of any food, fluids, it shows what we ingest, what we eat, what we put into our mouth. So, more importantly, what we can see. Let's have a look. We've got Shani, Putra Karaka, but remember, this is natural malefic. Shani Putra Karaka aspecting Chandra here. We've got also Mangala retrograde aspecting Chandra. Mangala, as per Jaimini astrology, as you can clearly see, is Gnati Karaka. What else? Have a look at Ketu. Ketu in the sign of Scorpio, Rishika. Have a look. It's also aspecting the second house from Karakamsha, Lagna, and Chandra there. So, what is the logical conclusion? As you can see, the second house, it is heavily afflicted. Yeah? Have a look. Obviously, it's not afflicted by Rahu, yeah, but it is heavily afflicted by natural malefics, which are Shani and Mangala. Mangala Mars is obviously Gnati Karaka, and here we've got Ketu in addition. All these three grahas are aspecting the second house from Karakamsha Lagna. It is very, very significant, very important. Okay? So, let's take a look at the fifth house, okay? From Karakamsha Lagna, okay? Fifth house from Karakamsha Lagna falls obviously in the sign of Karka or Cancer. What is happening there? Okay? So, as we can see, we've got Ketu aspect on there, yeah? From the fifth house from Karakamsha, signifying the mind, intelligence, okay? Yeah. So then we've got Shani, natural malefic, yeah? Aspecting the fifth house, Shani Putra Karaka. And we also got Guru Darakaraka, and more importantly Rahu aspecting the fifth house of intelligence from Karakamsha Lagna. So how clear is that picture analyzing the chart from Karakamsha Lagna? Okay, so I hope you will, as I've said before, you will draw proper and logical conclusions. Okay? So let us look at Upapada Lagna. Okay, let us look at Upapada. So Upapada Lagna falls in the sign of Sagittarius or Danu. As you can see, I'm going to use the blue color, yeah, to make it more visible. Okay, so let's have a look what is happening in the chart when we consider looking at it through Upapada Lagna. Okay, so let's have a look at the second house. Sorry, just give me a second. Second house from Upapada Lagna falls obviously in the sign of Makara or Capricorn. Okay? So let's have a look what is happening to the second house from Upapada Lagna. Okay, so we've got the aspect of Mangala, natural malefic, retrograde, which is also Gnati Karaka as per Jaimini Astrology. We've got also another aspect of Ketu on the second from Upapada. Yeah? We've got also the third aspect from Guru Darakaraka and Rahu from the sign of Rishabha or Taurus on the second house from Upapada Lagna. So we've got aspects of malefics such as Rahu and Mangala, Karakas of drugs on the second house, afflicting the second house from Upapada Lagna. Okay, so let's have a look finally at the fifth house from Upapada Lagna. Fifth house from the Upapada falls in the sign of Mesha or Aries. We've got Chandra here. So the fifth house from Upapada is also the second from Karakamsha Lagna discussed previously. Okay, so what is happening there? The same scenario, yeah, as we talked in case of Karakamsha Lagna in the second house from Karakamsha Lagna. Yeah, so as you can clearly see, we've got the aspect of Shani, natural malefic, and Putra Karaka on the fifth house from Upapada Lagna. We've got the aspect of Mangala, yeah, retrograde, which is Gnati Karaka on the fifth house from Upapada Lagna. We've got also aspect of Ketu from Rishika on the fifth house from Upapada Lagna, and on the moon, Chandra, moon, natural significator of mind. Yeah, so you can see how Chandra, how the moon, and also the fifth house are heavily afflicted by those malefics, which are also the Karakas for addiction, for taking drugs. And this is what I wanted to discuss and focus on in today's video. I hope it is helpful. What I would say, do your own research, study different charts, see how it all works when it comes to the drug addiction, to the cases of drug addiction, alcohol addiction, when you take into consideration such additional lagnas as Karakamsha Lagna, Upapada Lagna, Aruda Lagna. Study what is seen as you interpret, analyze, as you examine the chart from those additional lagnas, which are extremely important and of the first importance in Jaimini astrology. Okay, so here I'm going to conclude. I hope it helps. Take care, God bless, and I'll see you the next time.